Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast and live stream. I'm Jessie Lezak, fractional CMO at BDEX. And BDEX's founder and CEO, David Finkelstein, is out of the office. So in his place, we have BDEX's enterprise sales director back with us, Adam Fitzgerald. Good to see you, Adam. What's new?
Hey, Jesse, great to see you as well. Let's see, coming off a long weekend from the 4th of July holiday. It's been a busy summer, and I always get to this part of the year and I'm constantly surprised that we're already starting to have conversations and make plans for the fall and the holiday season, and it just seems like time goes by too quick. But it's been a fun ride, and it's been a busy summer so far. How about you?
Yeah, that's good to hear. Same. 4th of July was a lot of fun. I was telling you a little bit pre-show. We were going camping. We did some zip lining. My 9-year-old daughter pulled me out 7 stories high and made me jump from a line. It was very interesting. But we have an exciting conversation for deconstructing data today as well. Maybe as exciting as a zip line. But we're thrilled to welcome back for the 3rd time. So this is our most frequent guest of Deconstructing Data, Bob Audet, partner of Guidehouse, and he is coming back to the show. Let me bring him in. Welcome, Bob.
Hey, good afternoon. How are you guys doing?
Not too bad. How are you?
I'm doing great. At least I'm in air conditioning and staying cool. So it's a good thing. like yourselves, just getting off of vacation that I just got back from on Wednesday. So definitely excited to sort of start off my work with meeting up with both of you and talking about this exciting topic.
Yeah, likewise. Well, Bob, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. As Jesse said, you're our three-peat, right? So it's great to have you back. I believe we last spoke. We were talking about this a little while ago, over a year ago almost, in our episode. I think it was about enabling timely access to trusted data. So you are one of our most trusted repeat data experts, and I'm really excited for our conversation today. As we all know, AI as a whole is definitely a hot topic. And I know companies are starting to look at different ways to use and integrate AI. And so I'm excited to hear what you have to share with us today. Sure. But since it's been a little while, maybe you could kick us off by just refreshing our listeners a little bit on your story and your background and what led you to become a partner at Guidehouse.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those watching the podcast, Bob Audet, partner, one of the partner leads for our data AI practice at Guidehouse, which is a global consultancy firm based out of Northern Virginia. We both do strategic advisory, management consulting work, as well as digital related work, and also managed services. And I happen to be in our digital line of business that's very focused on strategizing, designing, implementing, operating, and supporting complex solutions. And I happen to be focused on data and AI solutions. And I've found my way here. Honestly, I love solving problems. I love serving different types of clients and understanding their challenges, their issues, and looking at ways where data can fuel organizations, where new innovative technologies like Gen AI, which we'll talk about today, can drive massive efficiencies within organizations and fundamentally even change business models and introduce new business models. And so that's what has brought me to, honestly, consulting and then sort of this line of business focused around data and AI, because I really believe it's everywhere. It fuels all aspects of our lives, our organizations that we work with. So yeah, definitely excited to be back for the 3rd time, and I appreciate the invitation to come back.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming back, Bob. And so you mentioned it, Adam, and we've already brought it up. We're talking about Gen AI today. So let me just pull up this first topic.
Yeah.
So Gen AI adoption, I guess we should start there. Many businesses, they already have started there. There are some out there who probably haven't. But there are investment risks and widening disparities. So we would love to hear from you on this with any actionable tips, tricks, and knowledge that you can share with the audience.
Yeah, and Jess, I appreciate the question and this topic. And I think really for the viewers, I want to just set a little bit of the stage before we kind of jump into this, because a bunch of the information that I will be sharing during this podcast is based on key takeaways from a survey that we completed in early 2024 in collaboration with the CDO magazine. And so I want everyone to kind of understand that I'll be drawing upon both that plus experience to help sort of shed some light on these different topic areas. And I think before we talk about this specific topic, a reflection point is, and I think if we reflect on one of the most innovative events that has happened prior to Gen AI, one of those happened around January 1st, 1983. This was the birth of the backbone of the actual internet itself. And if all of us sort of reflect on that for a moment, it's one of the most impactful innovations of our time, impacting global economies, how we work, our daily lives, creating candidly new business models. And the rapidly evolving and innovative capabilities of Gen AI have some similar characteristics. And we're really at these early stages of this new innovative revolution that has the potential to disrupt traditional business models, evolve how we work, create massive efficiencies. I recently came across a new law firm based out of the UK that's a 6-person law firm with over, I forget how many billion-dollar valuation, but ultimately founded on Gen AI. And so there's definitely going to be disruption across multiple industries, as well as efficiency gains. But I think right now, though, we're still at the infancy of Gen AI. It's not perfect, but it is evolving at a rapid clip and entering into this sort of age of what I'd like to call agentic AI, where Gen AI agents will start to do things for us. And I'll touch upon this a little bit later as we talk about the tech topic of this discussion. And as I draw from some of the insights, I think it's important for folks to understand that these insights were gleaned from about 243 different organizations, 8 primary industries represented, 58% of those from financial services, healthcare, insurance, government, 52 from different C-suite roles, predominantly those that are focusing on data, and then 60% coming from organizations with $1 billion in annual revenue and budget. So I want to share that initial context because I think it's important to kind of address this specific topic. I think organizations ultimately, what we've observed that with greater levels of understanding of Gen AI amongst leaders, that there is this higher likelihood that leaders will know how to harness the power of Gen AI to really drive competitive advantage and mission effectiveness. And, the most frequently expected use cases that we're kind of seeing, and maybe I'm sort of jumping ahead on some of the questions, but are going to be around like productivity, process automation, reduction in human labor, new services. So, I think in conclusion on this sort of initial sort of topic is I think Gen AI has the ability to sort of like substantially impact organizations in various ways. And I think the initial sort of takeaway that we are seeing is that education is key to getting ahead of the curve. And that is one of the things that is sort of creating, I think, a little bit of differences between different industries, different organizations in terms of how they're moving the needle with respect to Gen AI. So let me just briefly pause, see, Jess, Adam, if there's any sort of follow-up questions on this specific topic.
I mean, I like what you said about education has to lead. And it kind of goes into our first conversation too, that we were talking about 2 episodes with you ago, is about data culture. And now we mentioned that pre-show, but with the education piece, it makes me think, well, you got to have the right culture in place if we're really educating people here.
Yep.
So in terms of adoption, if they don't get that right, what are some of the investment risks, that could come up?
Sure. I mean, I think some of the things would be, people not understanding how to develop the right Gen AI type of solutions, be it a RAG-based solution, or how to properly do prompting or fine tuning, or even how to integrate the solution into an actual production application. It could lead to misinterpretation of use of results. It could lead to sort of ethical or brand damaging type of risks for an organization. And I think I think one of the biggest takeaways though from the survey around this, I think all of this topic around Gen AI, I think has to start with education. I mean, I think it was like 69% of respondents from the survey basically highlighted the fact that there's widespread skill gaps related to Gen AI. So what you see in terms of like some of this sort of investment risks or widening disparities is like organizations that are investing more in educating leadership, educating middle management, and understanding, and then eventually staff, like understanding how these Gen AI capabilities weave into an organization, understanding the differences between foundational large language models, or what is a retrieval augmented generation, or prompting and different types of prompting, or how to use ChatGPT ethically or responsibly within an organization to avoid data loss, or how to interpret the results, or how do you sort of identify and work through hallucinations that are result from some of the models. And so the risk would be, without addressing some of these skill gaps, organizations are not going to be as prepared, or there will be this misunderstanding and fear of the unknown, and which will, I think, slow down adoption and proper adoption of some of these capabilities.
Well, I think too that there's a natural resistance to change in general, right? And so I think from an adoption limitation standpoint, that's going to be something that companies and people inside of those companies are going to have to consistently wrestle with. And I think it ties back to the education piece, right? Like if we educate properly, maybe that helps to kind of break down some of those barriers and some of that resistance to change, and some of that hesitation to really embrace and adapt and adopt these tools the way that they can be inside of different organizations.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, I think there's a couple other dimensions to maybe highlight as well. I think there's some upfront discovery on a couple different dimensions, like really trying to identify like the different use cases and which use cases are truly most viable for an organization to do proof of concepts. And one of the things that we are seeing with our clients is exactly this, of like trying to take stock of, well, what use cases could they drive the most value, that's the least risky for them to tackle, and at least sort of test the waters, and to address some of that trepidation and help to manage the change to show what could be the impact. And so that's sort of one thing, is that having that proper use case identification and prioritization process and framework is critical, and the proper governance around that is key. The other part of that is taking stock of just general readiness across different dimensions, because in order to kind of make this all work, like many other things, like it takes the right talent, it takes the right governance, it takes the right technological architecture, it takes the right operational processes, because anyone can easily create the great Gen AI party trick, but in order to convert that party trick into something that's actually can be like seamlessly woven into a business process and an application is a whole other story. So understanding all of the parts and pieces and where the gaps are and defining what that strategic approach is, I think is also important to help address some of the concerns.
Mm.
And I think, a question I have for you is kind of taking that one step further. How do you ensure that those investments, like if I'm a company investing in these tools and in this technology, how do I make sure that that's scalable and adaptable to future needs?
Yeah, good question. I think there's part of this is like there's a couple aspects of this. One is like baselining, kind of where when looking at an existing process where you're trying to drive efficiencies and use a Gen AI model to help to drive efficiencies, you got to kind of baseline what the existing performance is for humans to do the same activity, and then be able to have a way to kind of monitor the performance of that now with a new Gen AI solution to do that, and understand how that's going to scale relative to potential growth in that specific business process. The other part of it is more of a I think a little bit of a financial thing, and like organizations are going to need to have the right financial resources to scale Gen AI solutions and really integrate those into business workflows and systems, because creating a POC is one level of effort, but actually putting these solutions into production and to operationalize them is a different level of effort. And having like ongoing conversations with the business about these solutions that have been put in production, are they yielding the value that's been intended? What adjustments need to get made to the solution that's been put in place? So I do think it's key for organizations that are wanting to go down this path. Like they need to develop the right business case and funding model to kind of marshal the necessary resources to get the job done right and to achieve the anticipated business value that they would hope to get from Gen AI solutions.
And that's a good topic. I mean, good question that you asked, Adam, and because it really transitions us into our second topic as well. I know we've already mentioned efficiency a couple times, but
Yep.
Our second topic is substantial gains in productivity, automation, and efficiency. And anyone who has started to play with Gen AI even just a little bit, you can see how it's going to increase your efficiency. But this is also at a mass scale being done. If you get your adoption right, of course, as we're transitioning away from that topic. But could you kick us off on this topic and talk a little bit about some of those substantial gains in productivity as well as automation and efficiency?
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to sort of the survey and the results of that, I think I touched upon this a tad bit, but we observed of all the respondents that increased productivity being the highest rated sort of response, process automation, reduction of human labor, new services, or expanding customer base. When we take like productivity, I can speak to an actual solution, Gen AI solution that we have put in place, leveraging RAG-based solution, advanced prompting, leveraging different SMEs. This was for a financial institution. I can't get into all the details, And for this financial institution, they had a spike in volume of different like mortgage loan applications that they needed to review for potential fraudulent behavior. And the challenge was that the spike in volume, their internal processes and people, it would have taken them a substantial amount of time in terms of like people hours. We developed a solution where demonstrating being able to cut that time by almost 50 to 60%, and being able to actually look at the industry regulations, look at the actual applications, loan applications themselves, and be able to rapidly identify where there might be regulatory or fraudulent activity. This is just one example of, I think, a whole lot that are out there. And we could probably spend an entire podcast session just talking about like all of the variants of use cases that people can imagine where they could drive efficiencies. This is just one real one for a financial institution. I know of others that, we have done sort of within our own firm. But, I think there's the areas where I think the most traction certainly will be around this productivity gains and automation. Now, I will say, though, for organizations that are unionized, that you have to kind of tread a little bit carefully, because you can't just sort of take any use case that's going to impact a unionized position. So some of the use cases you pick, you have to sort of like look at really carefully. And so there's definitely some risk to what use cases you pick and where do you start. So that's just one thing for viewers to kind of understand, that you got to really understand your organization. You have to understand the risk appetite of your organization. You have to understand sort of the value dimensions as it relates to your organization to be able to pick the right use cases to demonstrate the value from leveraging Gen AI solutions.
That's a really, really good point. And it makes me wonder, are there any other kind of similar challenges that you've seen, or similar themes as it relates to challenges with integrating Gen AI solutions into existing systems and technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly some limitations. I mean, obviously the most common one that people talk about around hallucinations and, the generation of incorrect answers. But I was participating in a recent Gen AI session where someone brought up that hallucinations actually, in their business model that's very researched focused, like in the pharma industry, hallucinations could actually represent a whole new business opportunity. It could represent a new drug.
Sure.
So, while hallucinations have a downside, there's also an upside. It just depends on your business and what the business is focused on. That is certainly a limitation. I also think that there's been limitations with respect to, for large language models and the data that's been used to create those models, and how do organizations leverage that data? How can organizations, from a security perspective, protect their data, leverage some of these open or private large language models, and incorporate that with internal data assets, yet protect their data and prevent data loss prevention, is certainly one of the concerns and challenges. Try to think of like other things I mean, those are probably a couple that I would at least initially highlight. I'm sure there's obviously, I mean, one other I would just note is just it's the pace at which this has been evolving and the new frameworks, the new tools related to Gen AI that have been coming out. It changes almost on a daily basis. So organizations need to stay abreast of what those evolutions are, understand what those evolutions are, how they can harness those. But just that pace of change is just hard to sort of absorb on such a continual basis. So I hope that answers the question, Adam.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing all those use cases, because I'm sure there's, like you said, there's so many use cases out there. I mean, those are just examples, right?
Those are examples. I mean, other applications, scientific research, or
Yeah.
some people are using it to generate music, or certainly when it comes to coding, you can actually do software product design, coding, and debugging using Gen AI solution, or actually writing things, be it a poem, be it a story,
Mm.
simple things of like creating a recipe. I mean, there's just like the imagination, the possibilities are to some degree somewhat endless, but it also depends on like what data is feeding it. But
That's right.
so there are a lot of emerging applications, and I think it's important for organizations to kind of stay plugged into kind of what's possible as it relates to driving efficiencies in their organizations.
Since you mentioned data, Bob, I can't help but ask to hear it from you, in your words, what Gen AI does when we do feed it garbage in, garbage out, because quality data is extremely important, and it's going to
Yeah.
become even more important as AI progresses. I mean, it is the fuel that makes the Gen AI engine run.
Yeah.
And so, I would love to hear out of your words, the importance of the quality of data.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll reflect sort of not just my words, but I'll reflect sort of what the 242 or so respondents to the survey said across multiple industries, is that 87% of them agreed that to make advancements around not just Gen AI, but also AI itself, that there has to be a heightened focus around data management, and certainly data quality squarely factors into that. Because yeah, you're absolutely right that bad data will definitely totally skew the result. And so organizations have clearly highlighted the fact that greater maturity around how they govern, how they manage their data is instrumental to being able to rely on these types of solutions more effectively, and for them to be kind of more mainstream. So I do think it's as organizations look at the different use cases and look at what type of data is needed for those use cases, it has to be part of the calculus of what's the quality of that data that's being used for that specific use case. So I do think and the challenges with some of these, some of the foundational large language models, that it's, the transparency on like what's being used to, what data is being used to kind of populate these things is not always transparent. So it does create a little bit of a dilemma for organizations. And so there have been some organizations that have actually created their own large language models, but that's a costly endeavor. And I wouldn't advocate that for every organization. For some, it does make sense, especially ones that have the right resources. And that's getting back to one of your first topics about the disparity. I think in the survey results, and I'm going to have to just take a look real briefly, but I believe that it was, yeah, large companies that had like $1 billion or more were about 2 or 3 times more likely to make investments in Gen AI than smaller organizations. And so the research showed kind of a big disparity. And so it does beg the question as well of, what will that mean over time competitively for mergers and acquisitions, for companies that can't quite get up to speed fast enough. So all considerations for folks to be thinking about.
Yeah, it's a great point. And it does sort of transition us to our last topic, which is governance and management struggles with AI. So we were talking a little bit about, what happens when the data is not good. And boy, that can be a struggle, right? But there are a lot of other struggles that, what should management be looking out for? I mean, even as people are starting to adopt this.
Yeah, I think definitely one of the things is around ethical considerations. And so for organizations, explainability of being able to, like, what the outputs are from their models is important. And certainly organizations from the research showed that ones that had greater discipline around explainability, with better documentation, with better ethical guidelines, explainability was much better, which I think can help. So one of the things many organizations are grappling, especially in the federal government as well, within 2023, when the White House executive order on artificial intelligence was put out, it kind of mandated this need for better responsibility and effective Gen AI governance, with the need for better explainability within models. So I think one of the things, and I'm even seeing this within the industry as well, from like what we're seeing in our clients, is that there's this need to reevaluate existing AI policies, or if they don't have a policy, is they're actually starting to work on their policies to provide the proper guardrails to manage risk associated with the usage of Gen AI capabilities. The other part is like actually taking a fresh look at their existing governing operating models, especially as it relates to AI, and either revamping existing data governing organizational or governing bodies, or establishing new AI governing bodies to ensure that there's the effective checks and balances that are being applied to deliver safe, secure, and explainable outputs that also relate back to and align to regulatory frameworks, and also minimize privacy risks. So it's not an easy terrain for organizations to grapple with, which is why I think when we look at a couple things from the survey, the readiness that we saw across industry, like I would say, was relatively low across many organizations. So, and I think part of it stems from some of these things around not having a robust AI policy and the right controls in place, not having their governing structure properly in place, not having people effectively trained on really being able to like really manage this and use these capabilities to have the people with the right technical expertise or having the right processes. There's like a host of different things I think that really come to bear to effectively manage this. Never mind the fact of like the process for use case identification, prioritization, and ensuring you're focusing on the right use cases. So all of these different things, I think, kind of fall into this umbrella of like, how do you kind of manage this? And I think the research showed there are some industries that are sort of leading the pack, and others that are trailing behind. I think lagging, but they are working on it.
Have you seen anything, Bob, that sticks out to you as like a best practice or something that you've seen really work really well as it relates to kind of auditing and monitoring, Gen AI performance or just AI performance in general over time?
It's a good, I think, short answer is I think there are capabilities. And, one of the things, and this relates more to kind of just general AI, but I think, being able to create, you have to be able, you can create different types of models to monitor the performance of one model versus another. There are, within the Gen AI world, I would have to, that specific question, I'd have to get back to you on like exactly what other emerging best practices, from our AI machine learning lead, Basil Hadar, who I think could provide probably some rich insights on that question.
Gotcha.
It's a good question because, as a manager, you wouldn't even know. It's like a new what am I looking at? New frontier, right? Like we're just pioneering right now and figuring out what we don't know.
Yeah. And I think that, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I mean, we talk a lot about disruption just in the last, 30 or 45 minutes. And, that can be a really good thing from a competitive landscape and a, development of new tools and new technologies. But, it can also be, a tool for evil, for lack of a better terms, if there's not the proper, safeguards and to your point, Bob, the right types of governance and management strategies that create the proper checks and balances along the way.
Yep. No, totally. And I do think that the proper ethical privacy security guardrails are critical to avoid costly brand damaging incidents. And like staff really need to receive the necessary training to kind of understand and have an awareness of what those guardrails are and why they're important. So I think, hence that's why I think when you look at the underlying investments within organizations that have, when we looked at, the organizations that were making investments in Gen AI over the next 12 months, that, vast majority were, I think it was like 53% were spending, less than 5% of their annual IT spend, which basically, when you think of that, that is sort of an indicator that I think organizations are taking a very measured and, a cautious approach to trying to embrace some of these capabilities, because some of them may not have these guardrails in place that we've talked about. But I do think, though, that we will start to see, as we pivot into 2025 and beyond, I suspect the amount of like IT spend to likely increase more substantially. Yeah.
That's an interesting point. I had no idea that was the trend among IT. Well, thank you for sharing that. And we are almost at our time, Bob. So we have to find out, could you update us? This is our final topic. I know this 45 minutes always goes faster than we think, but we ask everyone, as you know, so our third time asking you, what are some of your favorite tools in your tech stack? And maybe even, related to this topic.
Yeah, I'll definitely relate it to this topic. And I kind of brought it up earlier on, where this agentic age of AI that is upon us, where autonomous agents are a tool that has been introduced from LLM research and really beyond just GPT-4, really allowing LLMs to be able to give them the ability to establish goals and work against a plan and actually these autonomous agents actually doing things for us. And actually these agents can talk to each other to accomplish a certain goal and a plan. When you sort of step back and think about that and put this into context of complex business processes where this notion of having agents performing certain tasks and doing it far more consistently, far more efficiently than the average human can do with a repeatable, consistent level of quality, there's something to that. And I do think this is an area where I think we're going to see more and more traction. And it goes back to sort of the data points around where we're going to see most of the use case traction, which is around process automation. And I think autonomous agents in this world are going to become really critical. In addition to that is like LangChain, which is really integration of like open source LLMs with tool APIs to be able to build different LLM applications and be able to leverage external data sources. So there's just like this emerging like frameworks and tools that are continually popping up are things that those and organizations focused on this should really be keeping a pulse on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. No one has brought that up yet on the show, so always good to hear from you, Bob.
Keeping it lively.
In closing, would you like to let listeners know how they could find you if they wanted to reach you after the show? And also, you want to hold up the survey you've been referencing and maybe tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. I mean, this is just a hard copy, but State of Gen AI Today, Early Stages of Evolution, which was done in collaboration with CDO Magazine earlier this year. How can you reach us? How can you get access to the survey? You can go to Guidehouse.com's website. The entire survey, full survey, and the report is available on our website. So if you want to get further insights beyond what I communicated today, go to the Guidehouse.com website and you search for the State of Gen AI Today survey and you'll find it. You can always reach me via LinkedIn, send me a LinkedIn message, and I'd be happy to coordinate with anyone that's been participating in this podcast. I'd say those are probably the most efficient ways to get access to me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And thanks, Bob, so much for joining us. This is, as I expected, this was a great conversation, super educational. Always a pleasure to chat with you, and I'm sure we'll be doing that again real soon.
No, I definitely appreciate it, and happy to come back, and or happy to recommend other individuals that are definitely deep in this space as well, if interested.
Absolutely. We would love to get some recommendations or referrals for other guests from you, Bob. Thank you. And audience members, we invite you to get powered by BDEX. And I put the QR code on the screen for anyone watching on video. But, we've talked about AI. So now imagine harnessing the power of AI to craft your audiences, audience that actually resonate with your brand, ensuring your marketing efforts are hitting the mark every time. So that's what we do. And we want to help bring you closer to your marketing goals. So we are eager to guide you. Just simply visit bdex.com, or you can scan the QR code and click Talk to an Expert to get powered by BDEX. And also, for those of you who are curious about the Deconstructing Data podcast, we are open to sponsorship opportunities. We've gathered our data and we have some segment audience analytics to share if you're interested in getting in front of the same audience. You can simply email us at info@bdex.com if that interests you. And also email us there if you have any guests that you would like to suggest. And so, Bob, I'll be sure to connect with you after the show to get some referrals as well. But And we'd like to welcome anyone in the audience to do the same. So just simply reach out to us at info@bdex.com and share your qualitative data with us so we can continue to make this show good for you. And thanks again so much, Bob, for joining us. And Adam, always great to have you on the show.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the opportunity, and I hope for the audience, you gleaned some insights from today's conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.